Hey Defenders, welcome back. In this video, I want to show you guys how we can turn our Wazuh infrastructure into a multi-tenant infrastructure. And what this means is that I can have two servers. So I can have, for example, server A and server B pump into the same Wazuh manager and into the same OpenSearch cluster. However, what we'll be able to do is limit what logs particular users will be able to see. So for example, if we have user 1 who manages, let's say, server A, and then I have user 2 who manages server B, but I don't want them to be able to see each other. So for example, user 2 can't see server A's and user 1 can't see server B's logs, but I want to take advantage of the same Wazuh manager and same OpenSearch stack, then we can do so. And just a few kind of points on why you would want to do this. It's cheaper, right? Because we don't have to dedicate individual hardware for each user. So for example, we don't have to spin up a new Wazuh manager and Elasticsearch cluster for each particular user, right? They can take advantage of the same hardware stack, but we can limit what they can see. This is also less maintenance because now I'm not having to maintain two different Wazuh managers and two different Elasticsearch clusters. And we'll be able to, as I mentioned, control what logs users can view. I will say though, this is only possible with the OpenSearch distro. It is possible with Elasticsearch, but you have to pay for the premium license to be able to fine-tune the security around the documents, and then that'll become more clear as we go through it. But so if you're following along, make sure you spin up a OpenSearch cluster and not a Elasticsearch cluster. So stick around and we'll jump into it. And all right, so I have a freshly spun up Wazuh manager and OpenSearch cluster. Let me throw this off to the side. I'll also link to the GitHub here so you can follow along. And we'll have to take a few steps in order to make this possible. The first step is we need to create individual groups for our Wazuh agents. So our server A will get group server A, and then server B will get group server B. And so if we go into Wazuh, if we go into management, if we go into groups here, we can create our new group. So I'll just call this one server-A, and then I'll call the second one server-B. Oh, whoop. I'll call the second one server-B. And all right, now I want to edit the config of these. So how this is going to work is we're going to attach a label to every log that we receive from our servers. So server A, all of the logs that we receive, there will be a field with the label key, and that'll be server A. And server B will also have a field with the label key, and it'll be server B. And what that'll allow us to do is create a policy within OpenSearch that only allows a particular user to view indexes that have the server A field, and only allow user 2 to see indexes that have the server B field. So if we go ahead, and Wazuh already pre-populates the agent config tags, so all we'll need to do is copy the label portion and stick that here. This label key can be whatever string you want to use. I'm actually going to, instead of yes, I'm just going to say server-A again, and that looks good. So now I'll go ahead and save that, and then I'll just copy this so I can do the same for the server B. And what this config will do, you can specify you can put agents within a group, and when they are in a group, they'll get this same config file that applies to that group. And this doesn't completely overwrite the default agent config. So in the osec.conf file, of the agents that just adds to it. So you don't have to worry about copying all of the details from the agent from the osec.conf into this block. It'll just add to it. So that's nice. And then we'll go ahead and save it. All right, so we got those saved. And now let's go ahead and add agents to these groups. So I'll give this top server here, server A, and then I'll give this bottom one here, server B. So if we go into agents and let's add a new agent here, I'll say these are both CentOS boxes. So I'll select that. The IP address will be 3.15.191.202. And then for server A, I'm going to select the server A group here. And you can also assign agents to multiple groups if you want. So I could also give it the default group if I want as well, but there's nothing there. So I'll just leave it at server A. I'll copy that command there. And then I will do the same for server B and copy that command there. So I'll say yes, and I'll say yes. And then we'll go ahead and start these guys up once Wazuh installs. You can also add agents to groups after you install them. So if you already have agents registered with your Wazuh manager, you can go back into the groups tab under groups here, and you can add and remove agents from groups ad hoc. So that's nice. We'll do a daemon reload, and I'll go ahead and start Wazuh agent. And I'll go ahead and do it for this one. And then if we go back into our agents tab here, we'll see that our first server is assigned to server A, and then our second server is assigned to server B. And I'll go ahead and refresh these so we make sure that they've connected, and that looks good. And so now what we can do is if we go into our events here, I'll show you guys kind of the labels that we're talking about. So if I expand this guy here, you'll see this new field, and it's agent.labels and then .server A, and then we're giving it the server A value. So this applies for server A, and then if I filter that out, we will see the same for our server B instance. So if I drop this down, we'll then see the same field, but instead of server A, server B. However, the user role that I am assigned to has access to view both of these. So now what we'll need to do, since we have the label set in place now, is to create a new policy within OpenSearch, and then we'll have to do the same within Wazuh to be able to control who can view what. So to do so first we'll need to set a policy within OpenSearch. So if I go to my tab here, we will see a security field. And then what we'll first want to do is create a role. So you can see all of these pre-populated roles come pre-done with a Wazuh in OpenSearch install. So I'm going to go ahead and let me bring this out a little further and select create role. And here I'll just call it read underscore server underscore A. We will need to give it cluster permissions, and these are already installed with OpenSearch. So we'll say indices all. We'll give it the read, and then we will give it Kibana all read. And then for index permissions, we're going to give it our Wazuh index. So we can just say Wazuh star. Our permissions are going to be read, and then I'll paste in our document level security. And this is where our our labels come into play. So as you can see here, we are specifying our label, and that'll match exactly what we have within the label field that comes in with our document. So if we go back here, I actually need to change that. Instead of yes, that's going to be server A and server B. So it'll be what we have here. So if we go back here, so we can just copy and paste this block here. Make sure you get all of the open and close tags, so we can copy, paste this guy in here. And if we scroll to server A, this will then be server-A. And so what we're saying is that this role, read server A, will be able to read the Wazuh index. However, because server B and server A pump into the same Wazuh index, we are saying we can only read indexes that match the phrase agent.label server A. And so that looks good there. So we can go ahead and create. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to map a user to that role. So if we now select map users, I will go ahead and select map users, and I will actually need to create one real quick. So let's load that out. Yeah, the global's fine. And let's create a user. So I'll just say user1. I'll give it a password of please subscribe. Please subscribe. And I will select create. All right, so we have our user. So if we jump back into our roles here, we should be able to, I might need to refresh. Yep. Let me refresh. So now it'll give us the ability to select the new user that we've added. So here I'll say user1. And I will select map. So we're now mapping the user1 to our role that we created, which would be to read server A. So that looks good there. We also need to do the same for server B. So we'll go ahead and create a new role. Name it read server B. Cluster permissions will all be the same. So I'll say indices all. I will say read. And I will say Kibana all read. Index will again be the Wazuh wildcard index. We will say read. And then I will copy and paste this block again. However, instead of server-A, I'm going to say server-B. And say server-B there. So that all looks good. Go ahead and create. And then I'll need to create another internal user again. And I'll just call this one user2. Global's fine. So user2, and I'll say please subscribe. And create this guy. All right, good. So now let me refresh this page again. And we will now map the user2 to server B. And I'll just say to the server B policy. And okay, so that looks good. So now our OpenSearch policies are in place. Now we need to set them within the Wazuh app. So if we come back into Wazuh, and what we'll first need to do is edit the Wazuh.yaml plugin. So whatever server is running Kibana, we will have this file here. Let me install Nano real quick. And if we open this guy up, oh, must be in a different directory. Say Wazuh.yaml data. Okay, it's under this guy. So if we open this guy up here, and if we scroll down to the bottom, you'll see our API settings. And what all we'll need to do here is change the run as instead of false. We'll change it to true. And you don't need to restart Kibana or anything. So once we have that done, we can now jump into security here within Wazuh. and select the Policies tab, we'll first need to create a new policy. So we'll select Create Policy. I'll just give it read server A. Our action will be an agent read. I'll go ahead and select Add. And then our resource will be on the agent group. And our resource identifier will be our label. So that'll just be server-A. I'll go ahead and select Add. And then select Allow. So we'll go ahead and create that policy. And now we'll need to create a role. So I'll go ahead and go into role, select create role. I'll just say read server A, and we'll select the policy that we just created, which is read server A. And select create role. And now I'll go into the roles mapping to now map our internal user to this policy. So I'll select create role mapping, and I'll just say read server A. I'll just call it underscore mapping. And we'll select the role that we created, which is read server A. And I will now map that to my user 1 internal user. So I'll select save role mapping. And now let's do the same for B. So go into policies, create. I'll just say read server B. Again, select my agent read, select my group, and for my identifier will now be server-B instead of server-A. I'll add that and then select allow, create the policy. Now we're going to map a role to that policy, which will just be read server B. And I'll go ahead and select that policy. All right, and now we'll map our user 2 to this role. So I'll say read server B mapping. I will select our role, which is read server B. And I will select the user 2 internal user. Say role mapping. And okay, so I'm logged in as the admin user here. So we're done with our GitHub. Yeah, that looks fine. So if I go into Wazuh, if I go into agents, we can see the two that we have here, right? So I right now am the admin user, so I can see all agents, all logs, everything. But now, if I log out, there we go. All right, if I now do user 1, give it a password of please subscribe. And we are now logging in as the user 1 user. I'll go ahead and select private for this. And this will reload. And now what we should see is we should only see, okay, good. So now you see our total agents are 1. If we go to our agents tab here, you can see I don't see server B anymore, right? I only see server A. And if we select, if I go into our security events and select events, you'll see I will only see server A events. So if we parse out our label here we go. I only see logs associated with server A. If I were to minimize this, right, we don't see anything. Even though server B has logs hosted within this Wazuh manager, but the role that we're given cannot view those logs. Same applies for if we go into Kibana's Discover tab. So if I go into the Discover tab here, you'll see that I can only see logs from server A. So again, if we exclude this, to try to see other logs, we can't. And then if we log out, and let's verify that we're only, for user 2, we're only seeing server B. Give a password of please subscribe. And again, good, I only see one agent, so that's a good sign. And if we select agents, here we only see our server B agent, which is good. And if we go back into security events and everything again, we'll only see logs associated with the server B. So we have our, where'd you go, server B field here. And if we exclude this, we will not see anything that pertains to server A, which is good. So this is awesome. So we're able to now control what users can see data for particular agents, which is really nice and a really nice feature. You can maybe, if you have various groups within your organization, such as like a DC Ops group, who you say, okay, you're going to maintain, I only want to give you access to view logs from these particular servers, you can now control that, which is a really nice feature. And is a really nice security touch that you can add on. So now users can't see data from servers that you don't want them seeing, but still giving them access to the same Wazuh manager and to the same OpenSearch cluster. We can now save money in terms of hardware, save maintenance and upgrade headaches. Now we're only having to maintain one cluster instead of the cluster A server, or instead of the server A cluster, and instead of a separate server B cluster. So it's a really nice touch. It's kind of a little bit of a hack around, but the security within OpenSearch, you get a lot more flexibility than you do with Elasticsearch, and is a great feature to implement. And you'll also notice, so as I'm logged in with this user 2, you'll also see that I don't have the security block here, right, to create any new internal users or change any roles. That's because I'm not logged in as the admin user. So now users will actually have their own unique, it's kind of like their own unique OpenSearch cluster, because now they can create their own dashboards, and user 1 can see only their dashboards, and user B can see only their dashboards, which is really nice. And I think that wraps it up for today's video. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me, and I will see you in